All right, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro, Miami Hurricanes beat writer for The Athletic. It's Tuesday, October 11th, about 1:15 p.m. Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast is back with me. The Hurricanes are now 2-3 following a tough to swallow 27-24 loss to North Carolina at home, a game that I thought Miami was gonna lose going into the game, Carlos, and in the end, they fell behind early, and it cost them the way that they played defensively early in the game, and the offensive struggles in the red zone, well covered by everybody there, well covered by the fan base on social media. I guess my theme for this podcast, Carlos, is what are fair expectations for Miami moving forward? This is a team that began the season number 16 in the preseason. They got up to number 13 before they lost to Texas A&M, and we're on this 3-game losing skid. And the fan base is angry. They think that for the $80 million they're spending on Mario Cristobal and all the assistant coaches, what they're making, all the analysts, that this is inexcusable. They shouldn't be 2-3 after 5 games. I think personally, I wrote an entire column saying Mario's the right guy. Give him time. It just came out in the Athletic this morning. Obviously, I think we all go in with expectations for a certain team, thinking, Miami, because they have Tyler Van Dyke back at quarterback, they're going to come out and they're going to play great, and the coaching staff is going to make the changes. The Coastal Division stinks, so they're just going to cruise. They're going to win, but we never really take into account how every coach, it seems like, or nearly every coach in college football has a tough transition period when they first take over. I guess your thoughts, Carlos, on the overall theme and where the Hurricanes are today.
Well, listen, Manny, I'm trying to make an appearance today as Sebastian the Ibis. I'm not appearing as myself today because this is I might have jinxed this team, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to bring the mojo back. So I've got the Sebastian. I'm trying to see if this works. If this rally cap here brings this back. But this is very hot and uncomfortable, so I'm taking it off.
All right.
Going back to my. All right. So, it's funny. I think if you flip the Middle Tennessee result, this team is pretty much right where you might expect them to be this season. I think if they had beaten Middle Tennessee 45-24, and had lost to Carolina and Texas A&M, and we're sitting at 3-2 and 0-1 in the conference, you'd be like, okay, it's more or less where I anticipated them being. Maybe I anticipated them being 4-1 with only loss to Texas A&M, but I understand we're still rebuilding. We're still getting towards where we want to be. Mario doesn't have a full set of recruiting classes yet. He hasn't built the foundation of the program and the talent pool the way he wants to do it in his own image. So, it's going to take some time. And, a tough loss to UNC after TBD throwing for 500 yards, all those things, I think you would be okay. You wouldn't be wanting to fall off a cliff. However, because they played the way they played against Middle Tennessee, and it showed sort of it gave you a backdoor look. It peeled back the curtain as to what's going on within the psyche of this team, where they are still not fully gone from the days of Manny Diaz, or even their dark days under Mark Richt towards the end. This team has still got some psychological issues, some mental issues, some hurdles that they haven't overcome yet on preparation, coming to games prepared, being ready to play at the jump, and really taking care of business when it counts. Because if they had been, they would be, 3-2 right now, and we wouldn't be so disgusted after 3 losses in a row. Which, by the way, and this is the 19th season the Hurricanes have been in the ACC, right?
Right.
This is now the 12th season that they've had a 3-game losing streak, a minimum 3-game losing streak. 12 out of 19 seasons they've been in this conference, they've had a 3-game losing streak, which to me is insane. Do you know how many times between 2003, the year before they got to the ACC, back to 1983, they had a 3-game losing streak?
How many times?
3.
Different era of Hurricanes football, Carlos.
Exactly, and that's the thing. How do we go from that to this? And I think part of it is, I think Miami football sold its soul sometime in the 70s to be able to get the undefeated season, Super Bowls, then land Dan Marino and get the 5 national championships for the Hurricanes. And now we're having to reap the benefits, or not the benefits, but reap the back end of that contract.
Right.
Satan is slowly sucking the souls out of all of us every Saturday and Sunday while we watch TV. And I'm going to make another reference here, and I think you're not going to get it because I know you're not a big Harry Potter fan. But the head coaching job in Miami has become like the defense against the dark arts position at Hogwarts. Whoever takes it is cursed. This is incredible. You've got 20 years and different head coaches and guys coming into the job, and you're getting the very same results almost. So at some point, it needs to turn around. I didn't expect this team to be undefeated this season. I thought, like you said, because of Tyler Van Dyke coming back, because of how they finished the season last year, they could be 10-2. I felt maybe 9-3 was probably more realistic because they always drop a game that you don't expect them to drop. Now, you didn't expect that to be Middle Tennessee. You thought it might have been like Virginia or something like that. But at some point, it needs to get turned around. And, the good news is they fought and they got to the end. But again, it's like we're saying the same shit we say every year. They fought hard. They lost at the end. And it's a repeat of last year. And you look at this team and what is appreciably better this season than last season? And that's my big question.
Yeah, I mean, they're not running the ball better. I guess they're tackling a little bit better than they were. I mean, listen, compared to what it was, last year was pretty horrible. I would say right about now they're average when it comes to tackling. They're giving up more big plays, it feels like, in the passing game than they did a year ago. As bad as they were, I still think that they're giving up more big, explosive plays. And then Tyler Van Dyke, I mean, until this last game, really had struggled with the passing game. So they had sort of gone a downgrade in that regard as well. So, but I think the one thing we have to always take into account here, Carlos, is how different is the roster? In all honesty, how many of those recruits and transfers have really upgraded this team? Like Akeem Mesidor clearly was a huge pickup for them. He's one of the best defensive linemen in the country, according to Pro Football Focus, the way he's graded out. But is he having a Jalen Phillips type season? No. Gregory Rousseau type season? No. And then, guys like Tyreek Stevenson, I think, are playing injured. They had a groin injury, right? That he's kind of playing through, I think. Not playing his best. Daryl Porter Jr. just got on the field now in this last game, really started to play. Colby Young got in for the end of this game and showed us, hey, look, there's the guy that can go up and get the ball, right? The one that we talked about in the offseason. And then now, because of injuries, you're basically forced to play 2 Oregon offensive linemen. Before that, it was the same group of offensive linemen that we've seen here. John Campbell's finally healthy. He's in at left tackle. Zion Nelson has been out. I think that's affected the offensive line as a whole. We can go up and down the roster. Really, all you did was lose your 2 best receivers, and Mike Harley and Charleston Rambo, and you didn't really replace them with anything, right? I mean, there's no bona fide number 1 guy. The running game, they were injured last year. They were banged up last year. All you did was add Henry Parrish, who's basically replaced Jalen Knighton, right? Because Jalen Knighton's been a disaster so far. I mean, between the injuries, the fumbles, basically you traded Jalen Knighton for a guy who's just like him.
Less explosive.
Yeah, I just so to me it's like, okay, where's the changes in the personnel? Like where are the players? Where's the improvement as well? Like who's gotten better? Right. Those are the questions you always ask yourself the first year. But I caution it all by saying, and you pointed this out several weeks ago, Jimmy Johnson went 8-5 his first year at Miami, coming off of a national championship season. I went and I did the research. Go check out my article on theathletic.com. I looked up every title-winning coach since 2000, okay? And when they took over at a new place, what they inherited in terms of a record and what they did their first year. I'm just going to review this quickly, Carlos, and then we'll let you talk. The last champion, Kirby Smart at Georgia. First, he took over a program that was 10-3 from Mark Richt. They went 8-5 in his first year. 13-2, reached the title game in year 2, but they didn't win a championship till their 6th season. And oh, by the way, I would say this pretty confidently. The roster that he got at Georgia is probably a lot better than what Mario Cristobal got here at Miami. So people who are like, whoa, Mario should get to the title game in year 2. Is this a title contending roster right now?
Oh, no.
I know they're 13th in the 247 talent composite, but no. Ed Orgeron at LSU, he took over an 8-4 program. First year, he went 9-4. His next year, he went 10-3. When did he win the national championship and go 15-0 with Joe Burrow? Year 3. Dabo Swinney. What's that?
Then it fell off a cliff and he fell into a co-ed's bed.
Right. And that's basically what you got to watch out for, right? You got to be able to maintain it. Dabo Swinney. He was an interim coach. before he was officially hired as the head coach. They went 7-6 his interim season, 9-5 his first year, 6-7 his second year. They didn't win the national title till his 8th season. That to me is a little bit more comparable to Miami, probably in terms of where they were talent wise and where Miami is talent wise. Here's the one everybody's going to say, "Oh no, this is the example. This is why." Urban Meyer took over a 6-7 program at Ohio State. They went 12-0 his first year. They didn't win the national championship because they were ineligible. They went 12-2 his second year, and they won the championship in his third year. Jimbo, Florida State, he was on staff. 7-6. He inherited a Bobby Bowden program. It was 7. By the way, he was a part of it. Okay, he was the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
10-4 his first year, 9-4 his second year. Didn't win the national title till his fourth year. Gene Chizik at Auburn, 5-7 is what he inherited. He went 8-5 his first year. Then he got Cam Newton, who was the best player in college football, went 14-0 in year 2.
Yeah,
again, SEC school that has NFL caliber talent, right? Same thing as what you can say about Kirby Smart. That's why they got to the title game quickly. It's not that tough of a turnaround, I would say, in the SEC. Nick Saban, year 1, you inherit a 6-7 program, go 7-6 with a loss to Louisiana Monroe in the process. Next year, 12-2. They lose to the Gators. SEC title game, wins the national title in year 3. Les Miles, LSU, 9-3, inherits a 9-3 program at LSU. Again, another SEC program, always loaded with talent. Goes 11-2 his first year, 11-2 his second year, wins national title in his third. Now, he just got a program that had won a national championship a couple of years before with Saban. Miami's had one 10-win season since joining the ACC. All right, and we'll stop here because I'm not going to go all the way back. But Urban Meyer, okay, takes over at Florida, 7-5 program. They go 9-3 in his first year, 13-1, win the national title in his second year. Again, another SEC program. Urban Meyer was a ridiculous recruiter. And
Ron Zook recruited his ass off too, so it wasn't that there was talent.
Right. So I guess, look, those are just the most recent ones. You can check out the whole chart there, but essentially, like, again,
I'll give it to you in one sentence, Manny. It's the Billies and Joes, not the X's and O's. You can't, and like I keep saying, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. So you have one of the greatest coaching staffs in college football. It's proven. You have a bunch of guys that are proven. And if you're getting these kind of results, then what is the other factor then? What is the other variable? And you have to look and be honest. And I know we love these players because we've followed them since high school and we love their huddle tape and we've watched them on 7-on-7 and the whole shit. But at the end of the day, we have to admit these guys aren't that good. They're not. There's not enough of them either.
Well, one guy made the NFL off of last year's team in terms of being drafted. One guy off of last year's 7-5 team, and that was John Ford. Charleston Rambo didn't even get drafted.
And all that would be acceptable and reasonable, except for Middle Tennessee. That's the one that really is the biggest flaw in this whole season, in this rebuild, is that one stinker of a game is really going to change the perception of this season.
Yeah.
And also the outcome, because that's going to pull them down to either 7-5 or 6-6.
Correct. Now, I will say this. I did feel like coming off of this performance, and we did get a chance to talk. By the way, I love Kevin Steele just as a human being. Okay, there's certain coaches you get to talk to a little bit that you start to develop a good relationship with because they're just good people. Kevin Steele's a good person. He's very personable, puts things in a very, sort of human context. I led my story with this. This is a guy who coached with Tom Osborne for 5 years before Nebraska finally won the national title. Won 3 of 4. Okay, three titles in 4 years from 94 to 97. He was there on that staff that finally broke through and won a national championship in 94. Then he went to be with Nick Saban at the beginning at Alabama. Then he went to Dabo Swinney with Clemson, was a defensive coordinator for 3 years. And everybody's like, well, he got fired. He got embarrassed in the Orange Bowl. He gave up 70 points. Okay, but he was around these guys. Okay, he was with them. He was with Bobby Bowden. He said flatly to me and to a few other people we were chatting with yesterday, he's like, Mario's the guy. I wouldn't be here at Miami if I didn't believe that. And he sees the traits that are necessary. And I know fans are like, oh, you're just kissing Mario's ass, right? You're a reporter kissing. I have no reason to kiss. Do you think I get any special access from Mario? You think I'm getting some great stories? I'm covering this team as an objective reporter. That's the way I always been. I have always felt that because of his recruiting prowess, that ultimately that is what wins at Miami. It's the guy who recruits his ass off and brings the talent here. And go back, and it feels like a proven formula to all this, right? Like Howard got some really good players. Took him 5 years, but he got some really good future NFL type players on that roster. Eddie Brown and Jim Kelly and Bernie Kosar. Like those guys played in the NFL for a long time. There are other guys from that first roster. Go look at Jimmy. Jimmy was the best at it of anybody. He had issues with his coordinators. Things didn't work. Defense sucked. Erickson came in. He kept getting really good players to come to Miami. Butch, when you had the big turnaround, it's because Butch knew how to identify players. How many times was he called out for being a terrible coach, game day coach? Miami won because they overwhelmed teams with talent. Alabama wins because they overwhelm teams with talent. Clemson has won the ACC because they've got more talent than anybody else. It's not hard to figure out why the same teams win the championship every single year, right? Like if Wake Forest all of a sudden was winning national titles and Dave Clawson was doing it with a bunch of 3-stars, then none of this shit would matter. We could all sit here and laugh and say recruiting doesn't matter, but it does. It completely matters. And player development matters. And so Mario has that skill in my mind. Like go look at what Oregon has right now on that roster, right? They're 5-1. Dan Lanning got his ass handed to him by Georgia in the first game of the season. They've won 5 in a row. Why? Because they're good. They've got talent on that team. So I can't say the same about Miami. And yes, you can say they're 13th. What are you talking about? Look at all these recruits. No. Alonzo Highsmith's here because he knows there's no talent on this roster. His job is to help Mario get those players.
Yeah, and development and recruitment takes time. So obviously, this is not the year where you're going to see the full plan come to fruition. Yes, we got a ton of transfers in the portal, but those aren't necessarily maybe Mario's top choices. If they were coming out of high school, I don't think he'd necessarily recruit those same guys over. Some of them are exceptions, obviously, Daryl Jackson and Moultrie and things like that. Other guys are there because they're better than what we had on the roster, not necessarily the kind of guy or profile that Mario would normally chase. At the end of the day, also, it's recruiting players, like we've said a million times, not just for the talent, but for the cultural and personality fit and the mindset fit. The guys they have on this team, yes, they may be rated 4 stars. They may be blue chippers. They may be the best South Florida has to offer in some areas. But at the end of the day, if they don't match up with the culture and the mindset, and they're not the right type of guy that can handle adversity, then at the end of the day, that's not the guy you want on the roster. And that's going to take time to filter out. I think you're probably going to see a big exodus at the end of the year and a roster turnover again through the portal while we supplement it with recruiting classes to try and get to that next level and at least compete for a Coastal championship. Well, there won't be a Coastal next year, but get in the ACC title game. I don't think it's going to happen this year, obviously, but I think it's going to take time. But again, I think people would be a lot more patient if that Middle Tennessee result had flipped and Miami had won that game in that strong of a fashion, in that convincing of a fashion, as opposed to losing it. And it sort of, coming in with all this hype and the expectations with this coaching staff, I think a lot of fans were sort of taken aback by having that kind of a result. And they lost a little bit of patience. This North Carolina game, I thought they played well. I thought they played tough. I thought they had a chance. They obviously had a chance to win at the end. There were obviously mistakes they made, things where they shot themselves in the foot that gave them less of a chance to win at the end. But I think it was something where you wanted to see them be competitive and not get smoked like they did in 2020, like some people were predicting.
Yeah, I was worried. I picked North Carolina to win by 2 touchdowns, and I said it honestly. I thought they would keep it close by keeping it by 2 touchdowns.
And they gave us a result that we were hoping for, but didn't come up with the final result that we wanted. Again, moral victories aren't going to get it done, but at the end of the day, there's a process that Mario's going to follow. He's got a plan at the very least. You know what that plan is. He's made it very obvious. He's communicated it to everyone. But at the end of the day, we're still allowed to be frustrated by the results up until it gets to that point where we're no longer frustrated and we're happy.
Well, I'll say this. Josh Gaddis said something in the press conference that I think got a lot of people worried, which was we threw the ball too much, right? It's way too much to throw the ball.
I think he's right.
To win. And he's right. and he's right. And one of my readers at the Athletic, responding to some comments in the comment section, said, run pass ratio, okay, but for some other schools, UGA 50-50, Bama 46-54, they run the ball more than they throw it. Clemson 49-51, run the ball more. Ohio State 44-56, run the ball more. Miami right now 57-43 pass to run ratio. And go back and look at last year with Lashley, same thing. Couldn't run the ball.
You got 7-5.
There's a reason. There's a reason Mario went out and got 5 offensive linemen already in this class.
And why does Gaddis say that they need to run the ball more, run it more effectively? To be honest, why is that important? Okay, so let's take a look at every third and fourth and less than 3 that the Hurricanes had against North Carolina. There was 10 situations, right? That it was either third and 3 or less, or fourth and 3 or less. How many times do you think they got a first down out of those 10 opportunities?
Twice.
Did you see this? Did you read this ahead of time? Damn you.
No, I just thinking back to the game in my head. Right, I thought of 2 situations where that happened.
You just want a beautiful mind on me. You're Russell Crowe. What the hell? Where did you pull that out? But yes, 2 out of 10 in those situations. And that's why being able to run the football matters. Not only that, but if you look at the top 10 scoring offenses in terms of points per game in college football, how many of them do you think run for over 200 yards a game?
7.
8.
Okay.
How many of them do you think throw for over 300 a game?
1 or 2.
4. But as you can see, there's a balance to this. You need to be able to run the ball to be an effective offense. Having Tyler Van Dyke throw for 496 and 3 touchdowns, yeah, that looks great. But what was the end result? You got another loss. And it's because you need to be able to grind wins out when it counts. And I'll give you the flip side of that. Yeah, Drake May is amazing. He was throwing the ball over the field. He had a couple mistakes, which, by the way, were because the front 4 were providing pressure, like I said they needed to. But I'm not going to get to that right now. Anyway, so yes, Drake May can throw it all over the field. He's the guy. If you're going to put the ball in anybody's hands, as far as a quarterback's concerned, I'll give it to that guy all day. Let him throw it at any situation. But what did North Carolina do after Jalen Knighton's fumble? They went on a 12-play, 8-minute drive, and they ran it down Miami's throat. All they got was a field goal, but they killed clock, and they secured the victory, essentially forcing Miami to have to kick an onside kick because there wasn't enough time on the clock for them to get 2 real possessions.
Yeah, it was actually 18 plays, 81 yards, because I remember typing that in. And a lot of 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11 conversions that Drake May just made good plays. And that's why, people are like, why don't you have his baby, right? When I was tweeting in the middle of the game, they're like, why don't you just have his child? Because you're obviously just sucking this guy off. And I'm like, I don't know. Yes, he threw 2 interceptions against Miami, but he's still an animal. Like, this guy is unbelievable talent. And he made the plays that needed to be made. Yes, did he throw the ball up, to his receiver there near the end zone? Yeah, he did. But he also knew where the defense was as he was making that play with Akeem Mesidor draped all over him.
And he was staring the guy down the whole time.
That's what great quarterbacks do. They make the play. And so, to me, Miami held their own in the second half against one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Kevin Steele talked about how really the pressure that they brought just up the middle to close down those running lanes. They made the adjustments to shut down the run and basically told the edge rushers, go as hard as you can in the second half around the corner to create pressure on him. But defensive tackles, if you guys don't push those linemen back into his face, he's going to take off and run. And that's what happened. He couldn't run. And he got sacked 4 times in the second half, hit 8 times in the second half because they made the adjustments. So to me, that was a super encouraging sign for this defense. As bad as that game started for them, and it was 21-7, late in the first half, held them to 2 field goals. And so that's the kind of progress that you need to see against good competition. North Carolina has a great offense. They just have a great offense. You have to give it to them. They have a great offense. That's the one thing that's been consistent since Mac Brown has been there. So on the flip side, the offensive breakdowns near the red zone, I get it. You got to be able to punch the ball in. But again, this goes to the offensive line. Does Miami have Zion Nelson on the field? No. Do they have the kind of offensive line to run the offense that Gaddis wants? No. And that's the challenge. That's the hard part, because he wants to establish a run. He wants to give those linemen the benefit of the doubt and say, go out there, do your job. But it's just not happening. And so you have to make adjustments.
My whole thing is I think Gaddis called a really good game. Now, I will say people are coming out and saying that Gaddis ran formations he never ran before and he adjusted the offense and he changed it, that's bullshit. It's the same offense, guys. He's been running the same formations, the same shit. You just choose to see it through a different lens because TVD was actually completing passes and was accurate. The people were saying he was playing with more pace, that they were going more no huddle quicker. They went a little bit quicker only because in the first half, for the most part, they weren't checking back to the sideline for secondary plays. So
they did that. They still did that a lot in the game. They still did a lot.
In the second half, they did.
Yeah.
The second half, they did. But that's why it looked faster. But at the end of the day, my only complaint about Gaddis was that goal line stand where they got stuffed. And that's because first down, you don't get anything. You know you've been struggling running the ball, right? Second, you know it's 4 down territory at that point. I don't run a quarterback sneak with TVD for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm not sure you're going to get the push to get him in the end zone to begin with. Number 2, you don't want to get this guy hurt after he's finally gotten hot and has the offense going. So you don't want to put him at risk, right? And number 3, why do you take the ball away from your best ball carriers in that situation? To me, if you're going to be, if you know it's 4 down territory, you're going to go for it on 4th down. At some point, either on 2nd or 3rd down, you have to attempt play action and try and get the ball in the end zone through the air. And they waited for 4th down, and I have no idea what the hell that call was. A fake reverse tight end throwback on the goal line. That shit was like, what? Seriously? Are we doing this? It took 45 minutes to develop. No wonder TVD got through it, hurt as he threw it.
That's a fair criticism. I think there are several plays in this offense that take way too long to develop. And I think that's one aspect that he needs to change, because when he's in 3rd and short situations, you can't have sort of this delayed handoff to the running back. Like, give it to the fullback. Bring the fullback in there and give him the ball. Do something different that the defense is not expecting. It seems very expected, everything that he's calling, right, in those short yardage and tight type of situations. In the end, the offensive line has to move people, and they're not. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that their offensive line is below average. And look, it's not a surprise. Like, Zion Nelson is your best offensive lineman, right? That's what most people believe. He's a 3-star kid that they got out at the last minute. They stole from Appalachian State. John Campbell, 3-star kid out of the Orlando area. DJ Scaife was a 4-star kid down here, but are there really any 4-star linemen in South Florida? Again, like he's doing the job in the recruiting trail. He's gone out and he's gotten guys that he believes in. Inez Cooper, he swears is going to be a star. I wouldn't be surprised this week if Inez Cooper starts, just because of, kind of the struggles that other guys have been having moving people at the line of scrimmage. So, look, I think as long as they go into Virginia Tech this week and take care of business, they're supposed to be 8-point favorites. I think they're better than Virginia Tech, having seen Virginia Tech and what just happened to them against Pittsburgh and the 300-yard rusher and they gave up, and the week before getting killed by North Carolina. Pittsburgh's got a good team, but they don't have an elite offense like North Carolina, and they still had a good day. So I think Miami, it's not an easy game ever to play up there. I hate going to Lane Stadium. You have have you been to Lane Stadium, Carlos?
No, thank God I have not. There's no reason for me to go up there.
It's terrible. They've got the the turkey noise that they do between every success. It basically,
the cool thing is, other than Enter Sandman at the beginning of the game, everything else in that place from what I've heard is terrible.
It just drives you crazy, and so it's not an easy place to play. It's homecoming for Virginia Tech. They're 2-4. They're going to be up for this game. They're going to be up because they look at Miami and like, well, these guys are 2-3. We can beat them.
Yeah, not only that, but listen, any game from now on, no matter who the opponent is, based on the fact that we lost to Middle Tennessee, there's no guarantees.
Right. But if Miami shows up and does his job, which I expect them to do, and by the way, I think their next 3 games are also against first-year head coaches, right? Well, you're about to say that?
I think their next 3 games are very winnable. I know Duke was playing well early on, but I think they've shown that they're beatable. They're not at that level yet where you consider them a real contender for the Coastal. Right. I think Duke is beatable. I think you can go into Florida State at 5-3. And if you do that, then that's the measuring stick game, right? Now you've gone past halfway through the season. You've had enough time to really coach these guys up, to find your identity as a team. You're on a 3-game winning streak after a 3-game losing streak. Now it comes down to your biggest rival. How do you perform? How do you take it to the next level and show that you're a competitor in this league? And at the end of the day, it's really going to be about these cross division matchups to see if they can get into the Coastal, into the ACC championship, because they're already down a loss. They got to hope that Wake Forest and North Carolina State beats North Carolina, because I don't see Carolina losing to any of these other teams in the conference. They might, obviously, because the ACC is crazy. So is the Coastal. The Coastal is batshit crazy. We never know what's going to happen. But it looks like it's going to be these cross-divisional games that are going to make a difference. And we're kind of stuck with Florida State and Clemson. I mean, Florida State is beatable, obviously, because we're rivals, so it's going to be a tough game no matter what. But that Clemson game is going to be monstrous.
All right. I want to get to the mailbag. We got a lot of mailbag questions here. Well, a few. Whenever we record this in the middle of the afternoon, I kind of send out a late alert. People are a little tardy sometimes.
Because you don't want to answer 67 questions. That's a good move by you. That's a vet move right there.
All right. This is from Jason, J_HUD111. How do you see the Canes finishing out the season? Is it better or worse than what you expected 2 weeks ago? I think they're going to finish better than what I expected because I told you 4-8 or 5-7. With the effort that we saw against Middle Tennessee State. Right now, I think they're a bowl team. Does that mean they're 6, 7, or 8 wins? I guess it just depends on whether they show up to beat Georgia Tech, whether they show up to beat Florida State, whether they show up to beat Pittsburgh at the end of the season. I think they're somewhere between 6 to 8 wins right now. I don't think they're going to beat Clemson. Clemson looks like a very, very good team. It'd be a big ask for them to win on the road. Now, if they were to do that, then I think all of a sudden Miami fans would probably feel a lot better about this staff.
Yeah.
They're able to somehow finish the season winning 7 in a row. And then, even if they don't get into the ACC championship game, I think the feeling would be, okay, this coaching staff is good. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll probably a 6 to 8 win team somewhere in there. But I do think they're a bowl team because they're good enough to be a bowl team.
Yeah, I agree. And, a couple weeks ago I said, while you were dropping 4 and 5 wins and making my heart stop, I said 7 and 5, 6 and 6 based on what we saw. Right now, to me, they look like a 7 and 5 team. I think they're a 5 and 3 team in conference, but we'll see if they can turn this thing around. Like we said, if they get momentum now against Virginia Tech and beat Florida State, then there's a chance they could end up in that 8 and 4 range.
All right, this is from Brandon BC Mantilla on Twitter. Why has the running game regressed so much from where it was the first few games? Is it a product of more stacked box looks given from the defense or more a technique issue reverting to old habits? I think it's a combination of those things. I think there's no question teams know. First of all, they know what Miami's running, okay? And I think they've tried to run a couple of different combinations to get the running game going. I also think, and Gary Furman from CaneSport raised this question to Gaddis of the day, are guys worn out after the Texas A&M game? That was such a physical slugfest. And then you lost Zion, right, in that game. Are guys just their body physically worn and they're not getting the same amount of push? I think there's certainly something to that. That physically, your mentality, it's tough to say, hey, you're going to go out there and push teams around, which is why Mario is attacking the offensive line recruiting so hard.
Yeah. Because, like we said, it doesn't just require talent; it requires the right mentality. And you can say, yeah, shit, damn, they must be broken down after that Texas A&M game, and bodies are worn down. What the hell do guys go through in the SEC? Yeah. Then why are SEC teams able to run the ball on a consistent basis week in, week out, going against the best in the country? It's because not only are they talented, but they have the right mindset, and that's what they do. They're dogs, and if you don't have dogs up front, you're not going to get dog-like results, and that's what's been happening recently. It's easy to get up for one game and ball out, DJ Ivy, and then the rest of the season look completely average.
Right.
I think the other thing, like you were saying, it is schematic. I think teams are understanding what Miami wants to do, which is to establish the run first, and they're selling out because they feel like Tyler Van Dyke wasn't playing well. They were giving Tyler Van Dyke all that. They didn't play any complex coverages on the back end, North Carolina. They played cover 3 most of the game, and then switched to cover 2 a little bit and let Tyler find the open holes in the zone. And they just sold out on stopping the run. And that was their main focus, because they knew eventually the game was going to come down to the wire. And if Miami had a lead, they weren't going to be able to hold on to it because they couldn't run the clock out.
Right. Look, they got to run the football. I think he's absolutely right. That you can't just throw it 50-something times. And unfortunately, establishing that mentality takes time. Think about it. All of last year, that wasn't the mentality. The mentality was we got to run a fast-paced offense. We got to throw it a ton. And that's the offensive lineman that he inherited here.
Yeah, they got to have the willingness to play that physical style of football. Maybe some of these guys don't have that willingness.
This is from David Hernandez, _. How big of a concern is the O-line depth? Which offensive player and defensive player deserves more playing time after the UNC game? All right, the O-line depth, how concerning is it? It's concerning.
Very.
Lawrence Seymour didn't dress for the last game. He's a guy that they were very excited about when they recruited. I figured you would have probably seen him somewhere in that interior line rotation. Is he healthy this week? Is he practicing? I don't know. None of us are allowed to go out to practice anymore, to watch anything, to
It
take
sounds like it's your
attendance.
fault. Sounds like it's your fault, Manny. What did you do?
I did nothing. Um, that's hurting them. I think Logan Sagapolu and Jonathan Dennis, they're second and third year players that are just playing for the first time in their careers. That's not good. They're not going to look great. They're not going to get the same push. There's a reason Ja'Kai Clark and who else did they have in there? Justice Oluwaseun, right, who was terrible in pass protection. Why those guys were in there? Because they're just not as strong physically, I think, as those two guys. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it's a concern. Yes, absolutely, 100%. I think they can't afford to lose anybody else. We don't know if Zion's playing this week. We don't know if Ja'Kai Clark is back. I'm pretty confident Oluwaseun will not be back. So we'll see. We'll see how they sort of handle it, David. And then it's free. Do you want to answer that question? Then we'll get to the offensive and defensive player.
Well, we pretty much answered it together, but was a second half of it or no?
Yeah, the second half was which offensive and defensive player deserves more playing time after the UNC game?
To me, offensive player is pretty clear. It's Colby Young. I mean, we talked about Colby Young once they landed him in the summer. We thought he could be a red zone threat. I mean, early on in the season, after game 1, game 2, we felt like maybe they should use this guy at least in goal line situations to just jump ball it to him, or at least give you a big threat near the goal line. And it's nice to see him get in the game. But why the hell did it take so long? I mean, I know you responded to a Twitter question along the same lines of this, and the answer was, well, he got here in July. It took him a while to linear. I mean, for a certain package, if you have a package for a guy, like a goal line package, where you run 2 to 3 routes, and your only responsibility is go get the football, I think you can handle that. And I think it was a little head scratching for me why they didn't put him in earlier and have him in that sort of a package. If they had done that in the goal line stand where they got stuffed on 4th and 2, if they had thrown a jump ball on 2nd or 3rd down to Colby Young, maybe they come away with a score. And against Middle Tennessee, when they got stuffed on the goal line, if they had him on the goal line, maybe he could thrown it up to him. I'm pretty sure he could have out-jumped somebody from Middle Tennessee and gotten the ball. So maybe that turns the game around. So I think Colby Young definitely needs to play more. As far as defensive guys are concerned, I don't know if there's one guy that I'll point to that needs to play more. I'll tell you one guy that I don't want to see ever again, although he made a big play, Keyshawn Smith.
Five missed tackles, I think, right, against UNC. And but again, that's a linebacker position we knew would be an issue. And Wesley Basaint did play more. I think it was a season high 15 snaps for him in that game, from what I remember. They've been talking about it all year. Maybe by the midway point of the season, you can start to trust them, right? It's little by little. It's a process. Probably. Yeah. And so maybe that's the guy. I agree on both of those counts as far as who you potentially could see more of here. All right. This is from Alex Perry, A Perry 1927 on Twitter. Is Mario going to be able to convince recruits that they should ignore the on-field results this season? They go 6-6. He's going to have to work his tail off to maintain a top 10 class. Well, I agree. I think, look, the recruits right now that were there, and there were a lot of them, they had more than half of their commitments, and then other kids that they're targeting at the UNC game. I think the majority of the commitments, and I trust Gabby Urruti on this, it's his job to talk to these guys. I don't spend nearly as much time as he does talking to them.
And he does a great job with it.
His feeling is that that's not going to happen, that nobody's ready to jump ship yet. But I will caution that an embarrassing loss or, a terrible finish, that definitely puts them in position to have other schools come in and swipe them. That's just the way it is, especially when you recruit kids in the state of Florida who seem to flip quite a bit. But it seems to me that a lot of these guys, look, the guys that went to IMG or at IMG, I think those guys are all locks to come to Miami at this point. It's a there's NIL involved. There's other things, right, that play a factor nowadays. So I think I don't necessarily see them losing any key people in this class.
Yeah, and I think like you said, if it's a 7-5 or a 6-6 season, but it's competitive all the way through, I think that's something you can sell to these kids. Where like, do you see how close we were in the margin of victory, or just a play here, a play there turns the game around, and it flips a result? That could have been you on the field to make that difference, to get us the victory, to secure it for us. So imagine with you here, those losses turn into wins, and now we're going from 6-6 to 10-2. Thanks to you.
Right. All right. This is from Asher Wildman on Twitter. Asher always is a constant reader of us. Manny, I understand the recruiting sites, but please explain 20 plus years of typically the best class in the Coastal and traditionally in the top 25. I refuse to believe these are the best players based on results. Why else do we lose to worse teams? Coaches don't think so. Is talent really evaluated properly, and how honest are these classes? Lastly, wasn't Alonso supposed to evaluate guys now to help with finding kids as opposed to relying on these recruiting sites? Okay, first of all, Mario, his recruiting, his board, what he does is not based on what 247 or Rivals or anybody says. He does his own evaluations. He goes after his own players, and really Alonso, he's assisting, but Alonso just got there. So like, this is all this is all moving forward, right? In terms
Right.
of their plan and their execution here. The overall aspect of the 20 plus years, I think I've been telling you guys for a long time now, there's a difference between a top 5 recruiting class and everybody else. And it's the depth, it's the amount of 4 and 5 stars that you get, and the amount of guys that are quote unquote team players that are willing to sacrifice and wait. I think in today's world, unfortunately, that's a lot harder to find, quality guys that are going to stick and invest in the program the way they should be. I think there's a lot of selfishness. There's a lot of guys that just, I'm not playing as a first or second year player. I'm out of here. And they kind of go in the tank. And so I think the mental aspect of it, that's the one thing the recruiting websites don't factor into any of this. It's always height, weight, and talent and hype. But there's such an important factor, which is the coachable factor.
Absolutely. And I think that's when you watch the U Part 2 documentary and they talk about how Butch Davis was able to get all this collection of talent together, especially during the times where the team was struggling and the sanctions were on. One of the things they talked about was that he used a sports psychologist to identify the profile of player that would best fit within his program and lead to success. So it's not, something foreign that you have to recruit the right type of guy, personality wise and character wise, not just talent wise, because sometimes you could be an amazing athlete, but if you're an asshole and you don't want to listen, that's not going to work either. And as we've seen, this is only Mario's first recruiting class, and he jumped on late, didn't have a chance to really fill out the board. And his recruiting strategy, as you've talked about, is about building long-term relationships with kids, and he hasn't been able to do that just yet. So I think after year 3, you'll see a really good picture of what it is Mario's going to bring on in terms of recruiting. And again, Alonzo Highsmith hasn't been able to help with that just yet. I think the other thing that leads to what you're talking about with overrating guys is there's that South Florida boost, right? I mean, I think you get an extra couple points just for being from South Florida. And maybe if you were compared to somebody else that maybe is equal talent, you'll get rated a little higher because of that. And I also think the onset of 7-on-7 has helped create superstars out of guys that aren't necessarily as talented when you put the pads on and you have contact. And we've seen that over the years. I mean, 7-on-7 has its place, but at the same time, a lot of people put way too much stock into that, with guys playing in t-shirts and shorts, or really skin tight biker shorts and skin tight t-shirts, and not really seeing the film and seeing what a guy is like when there's pads on and there's contact.
I agree with all that. I think those are all excellent points, Carlos. All right, this is from Brian Haley _Brian Haley on Twitter. Given TVD's slow start this year, do you guys think he comes back for another year? And if so, what does that mean for Jake Garcia and the quarterback room? Huge question, huge storyline going forward, right? I think Tyler Van Dyke, based on what he did against North Carolina, if you were to tell me right now, what do I think happens the rest of the season? I think he puts up a quality season, and I think he enters the pros. I don't think they're going to face many defenses that are tough down the stretch that he can't put up some numbers against besides Clemson. Right. So I could picture a 25 touchdown, 3,000 yards, 7
interceptions,
7 picks, 8 picks, whatever it is. And he goes and the NFL tells him, yeah, come out. You're going to get drafted. I think there's such a need for arms in the NFL right now. He's got a good arm. Has he shown me enough as a quarterback for me to believe he's going to be successful in the NFL right now, the way that he's played? Or is he more of a system guy under Lashley? That's another question, right? It's a hard question to answer. I don't know. I don't have those scouts' eyes. Carlos, I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but just your thoughts.
I don't think he comes back either way next year. I think he finishes out the season and either goes into the NFL or he leaves to another program, maybe SMU or somewhere else, or he feels the system fits him better to make him look even better and raise his draft stock. I don't think he's comfortable in the system, even in a game like this where it took him 2 weeks to prepare and really film study, really get into it. He looked good. He put up numbers, but he's still inaccurate on some throws. It doesn't feel like this is the kind of offense he wants to play in, and that's difficult to watch at times. I mean, he played really well, like I said, but I think the comments he made during the week, I think there was a comment that everybody was sort of jumping on where it said, I was meeting with Coach Ponce and Coach Gaddis more during the week to tell them what I like, what I don't like. And people were like, why weren't they meeting before? And they skipped the whole part where we said the word more.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is on him. They already meet. I can guarantee you they both meet with him already on a weekly basis to go over game plan. Now, if you want to get additional time in with them and really get down to the nitty gritty of what it is that makes you feel comfortable, then you got to do that, bro. That's on you. And that's an individual thing. And I don't think his ability to mentally process defenses right now is at the level of an NFL quarterback. I think this offense will help him get there. He might not see that. He might be a little stubborn with it. But I think this is the best offense to get him prepped for the pros as opposed to Lashley's offense. But if at the end of the day, what he's thinking about is numbers to help raise that draft stock, then I don't think he's going to come back either way. I think he either has a really good finish to the season, or if even has a crappy one, he's going to go either to the NFL or he's going to transfer out somewhere else.
I guess the last part of that question was, what does it mean for the quarterback room? Yeah, I mean, I think if he were to come back, it would definitely force some things to happen in terms of transfers, etc.
Yeah, Jake would probably leave.
All right. This is from Danny. Hey, Mr. DJ21 on Twitter. Is it time to see what Daryl Porter can do with more snaps? We know what we have with Tyreek Stevenson. I think he's out of position. What's up with Romello Brinson's playing time at wide receiver? I think there's no choice but to play Daryl Porter more now. Played 35 snaps in this last game is most. I think part of it, again, they ran a different system at West Virginia. Once, Jamil Adai left there and went to Georgia, they, there's different coaches there. So whatever it is he was running at West Virginia last year is probably a little different in terms of responsibilities and so forth in their coverage schemes. And, you come here, he's an outside cornerback, and they believe Tyreek is the best guy. Now, Tyreek, as I mentioned earlier, I think he's dealing with a groin injury. And we don't know, did he go into concussion protocol? That's the word that Mario used, protocol. Is he going to play this week? Not sure. But I liked what I saw out of Porter in 35 snaps.
Yeah, I think the system they went mainly cover 2 in this game, and they switched into cover 3. But once in a while, I don't think they went man at all, or maybe once or twice. They went man around the goal line, but aside from that, in the open field, I didn't see it. And that suits him more because he's coming from a system. Remember, in the Big 12, they're not a man you up kind of team. The conference, Big 12 plays a lot of cover 4, cover 2. They're a zone conference, and they mix it because they use a lot of odd fronts. They use a lot of 3-3-5 stacks. So for him, he's feeling more comfortable in this new zone-based system. He's going to look better. And I think DJ Ivey's going to look better. I think DJ Ivey played better this week than he definitely did against Middle Tennessee. And allowing DJ Ivey to not have to lock on one-on-one with somebody is going to help the defense as a whole. But I think Daryl Porter feels more comfortable in this new system. And I think the team as a whole looked really good running it after that first half where they settled in and felt comfortable.
As far as Romello Brinson is concerned, Brinson's been targeted 6 times in 5 games. And I'm going to click on his snap count if I can get to it here. But I don't think he's played a whole lot. Let's see. He played 1 snap against North Carolina, had 60 against Middle Tennessee. Seems to me like
saw something.
He must be a transfer portal candidate is my mind at this point. I think once you kind of fall out of the rotation, and Colby Young looks like he's probably going to pass him. That's what I always sort of worry about with kids like that. But hey, listen, that's the game now. You don't play. Most guys want to leave when they don't get those opportunities, and Romello just not part of it. Whatever he's doing is not doing enough. All right, this is from Sam Knowlton on Twitter. I listened to the podcast while jogging across the Manhattan Bridge. Can you hype me up real quick so I can finish my workout strong? I'm leaving that to you, brother.
Oh, wow. This guy wants me to hype him up. First of all, I feel sorry that you have to live in New York. I really feel sorry for you. Second of all, running across the Manhattan Bridge, safety first. Make sure you don't have your wallet on you. Make sure all your valuables are stored away somewhere else, and have a sharp key with you in case a mugger tries to chase you down or a homeless person tries to beat you.
Wow. You want to be pumped up, not scared. Come on, man.
So listen, man, I don't know what sort of thing you're into, but I would say envision yourself as Rocky running through the snow, right? Envision yourself having to face Drago. Think of yourself as Rocky in the Ferrari driving away from the mansion right after Apollo dies. And it was your fault that you didn't throw in the towel in time. And now you got to prepare to face this Russian beast, this animal who's pumped full of drugs and steroids and horse tranquilizers and wants nothing more than to mount your head on his wall over his fireplace. What are you going to do? Run over that bridge. Run past those peeing homeless people and muggers. Get to your house.
All right. What I'll add to help you out there, Sam, is now close your eyes and imagine the Hurricanes winning out and getting into the ACC championship game. I hope that gets you pumped up, brother.
Yeah, I mean, great, man. You're feeding this guy fantasy. I'm trying to get this guy hyped up with some like realistic scenarios.
All right. This is from JK Slay on Twitter. I think this rebuild will take 5 to 7 years. By rebuild, I mean serious contender to win a national championship. This job is a rebuild. Why, if you do, think it can be done quicker? Here's the only reason why it might be able to be done quicker. It's called the transfer portal.
Yeah.
I also think that because Miami's investing big dollars into this and could potentially want out of the ACC, they might be highly motivated to spend a little more money, wherever it is, recruiting trail, NIL, coaches. Maybe that's why things speed up. But ultimately, I do think it's probably a 5 to 6 to 7 year rebuild in terms of being a real championship contender. Now, if this 12-team playoff, I think Miami could get in before that. But contender, real chance to win, yeah, might take that long.
I agree.
All right. This is from Animals to MIA. Mario is 64 and 63 on Twitter. Manny. He's 64 and 63 overall as a head coach. What all of a sudden he's going to win 100 straight games? Laughing emoji. He's mediocre. Been saying this. Great recruiter. That's about it. That's his take. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, he's 64 and 63. How many of those losses came in an FIU program that was a dumpster fire when he took it over? He then took that program to 2 bowl games and won a bowl game there. He came into an Oregon program after leaving Alabama, where he learned under arguably the greatest college football coach of all time, and took over a program with Willie Taggart that went 4-8 the season before. They got it to 7-5, 7-6. He took it over. They went to 8 or 9 wins, I think it was, right away. Won a Rose Bowl.
2 Pac-12 titles.
2 Pac-12 titles. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to focus on his FIU record, sure, it looks pretty shitty. But, I mean, if you look at the rest of his resume, I think it's pretty impressive. And I think his recruiting prowess is undenied. Not everybody's a great game day coach. They were talking about Kirby Smart being a bumbling buffoon before he won the national championship. Come on. I mean, how many times did they want to fire Jimmy Johnson before he won a national title? How many times did they want to fire Butch Davis before he assembled that team that won the title eventually in 2001 and before they had that run in 2000? So, I mean, everything looks like shit until it doesn't. And I think the potential for this, the ceiling for this, is a lot higher than the floor.
All right. This is from Jay Jackson, Matty J06 on Twitter. Do you see this season finishing more reminiscent of the first year of Manny Diaz or the first year of Rick? Rick turned the corner and went 5-0 after a 4-game losing skid, ended up winning 15 in a row into 2017. Meanwhile, the wheels fell off for Diaz, losing to FIU, Georgia Tech, and Louisiana Tech. It's hard to say right now, Jay, because I feel like this locker room, you never know what you're going to get. It's literally like the box of chocolates that Forrest Gump is carrying to
Yes,
dinner.
movie reference. Manny threw a movie reference. If you had that at home in wide right bingo, take a shot right now.
But I, based on what I saw Saturday, based on my conversations with people at Miami, I'm more willing to think that they end the season strong than with a flop.
I agree. I think it'll be closer to what Rick's first season was than Manny's. I don't see them reeling off an undefeated season the rest of the way because I don't think they beat Clemson. But if they really turn this thing around, they could finish with 1 loss the rest of the way and finish 8-4.
Andrew V _17 on Twitter. Do you feel better about the Canes moving forward after how they looked against UNC? Yes. Are you
Yes.
encouraged about the wide receivers? I don't know if I'm encouraged by the wide receivers, but I feel better that Colby Young has made an appearance and being 6'5",
Well,
215 pounds, and a good, it seems like he's got good hands. I think that'll help.
which is what I put in my bio in high school: 6'5", 215, good hands, ladies.
But that was for women, right? Not for football.
I was still catching passes. So to me, I think it's encouraging that Brashard Smith stepped up this week. I think he had a really good game. I think Brashard Smith made some plays. Obviously, I think Will Mallory had a really good game, which although he's not a wide receiver, we include him in the passing game because he's a big part of that. I think Jaleel Skinner is going to be a big part of the passing game moving forward. He looked really good, although he made that play at the end where we couldn't get out of bounds. I think he looked really athletic, and he has every time he stepped on the field. I think he's a mismatch. I think you found something a little bit in Frank Ladson. You've understood that he is not a vertical threat. He's a possession guy, and as long as you throw it to him within 8 to 15 yards of the line of scrimmage, he's probably going to come down with it. You don't want to throw him a jump ball because, as we saw at the end, even though it was a contested catch, and that play ended in a penalty, so it didn't count. That ball to him in the back of the end zone, down the sideline, couldn't come up with it. He's not that kind of guy, but he is solid in terms of a possession receiver, I think. To me, I think it was a little bit disappointing that Keyshawn Smith only got 26 snaps. I think it was. I thought, he's their most explosive wide receiver right now, and I think he needs to be treated as their number one guy because of his explosiveness, and try to get him vertically more.
Banged up a little on special teams. I saw that with my own eyes and tracked him when he went into the injury tent. I think maybe part of it was precautionary. Yeah. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode, Carlos. I think I may come back with Andy Bitter at some point this week. I don't know if you checked out the last episode with Andy when we did sort of an ACC preview. We do the ACC mailbag every single week, and Andy and I answer the questions for that at the Athletic. We will have a roundtable previewing Miami, Virginia Tech, 2-3 versus 2-4. The game everybody wants to watch this weekend.
Yeah, let me tell you something. If Miami wins, Virginia Tech slips to what, 2-5?
Yeah.
Andy needs to start another podcast and call it Bitter and Bourbon.
I will let him know about that, Carlos. Well, make sure you check out all of Carlos's work at the MIA All Day podcast. He does a terrific job there. He saves his best stuff really for his podcast, not mine, which I can't blame him. He's got so much good stuff that he can bring a lot of great stuff to mine and still have even better for his. So make sure you listen to his podcast as well.
And watch it on YouTube. I'm putting my stuff up on YouTube now too. I actually did a PowerPoint for last week. I gave some keys to the game, which were dead on, except for one fact, which I thought the Hurricanes could run for 250 yards against North Carolina. Josh Gaddis thought so too at the beginning of the game, and both of us were wrong.
I knew they couldn't, but hey, why am I bragging about that? Carlos, thanks as always. Miami plays Virginia Tech 12:30 Saturday. Again, hopefully have another podcast before then. If not, we will talk to you after my trip to Blacksburg.
Oh, one more thing.
Go ahead.
Monday night, live taping the Wide Ride podcast at the Garrison Tap Room in Miami Lakes.
There you go. Thank you for reminding me.
We're going to start doing live. Well, not live, but we're going to be recording our podcast, apropos at a bar to be able to drink away the season. And if you guys want to come by, stop by, ask live questions. We're going to be there recording it. Miami Lakes. It's called the Garrison Tap Room in Main Street in Miami Lakes. It's a great little place, over 100 beers, great Canes bar. The owner's a huge Canes fan. He wants to make it sort of like the Canes hub for all Canes fans in the Miami Lakes and Northwest State area.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for the preview. There will be stuff shared on social media as well as a reminder. All right. That wraps it up for the Wide Right podcast. For Carlos Ledo, I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. We'll see you next week.